I'm going to share my screen. First, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank y'all very much for everybody who has, hang on, advanced. All of y'all who have made donations, Lorenzo and I appreciate it very, very, very much. That is what makes it possible for us to produce these programs. So we very much appreciate it. I am Elaine Trijiani. I think most of y'all know me. I am an art historian. I used to work at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. I've been living in Italy for 20 years, and I am a food professional. I teach cooking classes. I design culinary travel programs. I'm an olive oil taster and a wine taster. I teach tasting lessons. So since the lockdown hit, since COVID hit, I've had to kind of reimagine how I work. And so I've been doing this series of virtual visits. So today we are going to virtually visit Bologna. I'm going to talk about the city, some artists who worked there who really revolutionized Italian painting in the 17th century. And then we're going to make some Bolognese recipes, which are really typical of the Christmas table. So now that we're coming into the holidays, we're going to learn how to make some good Italian Christmas recipes. So you can see Bologna there on the map. You can also see kind of highlighted here is the region of Emilia-Romagna, which Bologna is the capital of. So remember, Florence is the capital of Tuscany, which is down here. And Bologna is the capital of Emilia-Romagna, and they actually border each other here. So real quick, this is where I live at the Castle Popiano. I don't live in the castle. I rent from the Count and Countess and live right down here. And that's my house that you see on the right. So that's my kitchen door. I'm right behind that door as we speak. And here is where Bologna is located. And I use this map on purpose so you can see that mountain range. So Bologna is, Florence is right down here. Bologna, there's kind of this pass right here, and Bologna is right there on the other side of this Apennine mountain range. It is one of the oldest cities in Italy. It's been inhabited since the 3rd millennium BC, which is a long time ago. The kind of enigmatic Villanovian civilization established one of their capitals here. It was one of the 12 important Etruscan cities of the Etruscan Federation. And at that point it was called Felcina, and you run into that name every now and again. There's a type of wine. It's actually made in Castelnuovo Berendenga. It's called Felcina. Y'all may be familiar with that. And they make really good olive oil too. It's called Felcina Giuseppe Mazzacolin. Excellent, excellent olive oil producer. So if y'all see any of his oil, you might want to taste it. He does some interesting things. Bologna was conquered by the Gauls at a certain point and then fell to the Romans in 200 BC. So that's kind of a long history, and we've only gotten to 200 BC. What happened under the Romans is that the Via Emilia went in, this road that went from the coast to Bologna, Modena, Reggio Emilia, and Parma. Those are those kind of main food cities in Emilia-Romagna. And then the Via Emilia goes on to Piacenza, and then Milan is up in here. So today, Bologna is a great university town. It's a city of about 400,000 people. It's a real communications hub. There's an airport there. There's a big train station there. The industry in this area, this whole area really, there's a lot of industry connected to food and also food tourism. There's some excellent restaurants up here. And then the mechanics industry is also important. And I'm sure a lot of y'all have, plenty of y'all may have even been here to go test driving, because this is the area where Maserati, Lamborghini, Ducati, and also Ferrari are made, all in this area. I'm just going to show you quickly what those mountains look like, because sometimes y'all hear me talk about this physical barrier between Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna. So when I say that customs and traditions don't necessarily kind of bleed over from Tuscany and to Emilia-Romagna and back and forth, that's because these mountains are a large physical barrier. So before you could get on the high-speed train that takes you from Florence to Bologna in an hour and 20 minutes, it was a chore to get to Bologna. These mountains are high enough that you can even see here, they're the ski slopes at Abetone. So that's kind of the reason why some of these local traditions have stayed local. So here's Bologna from above. In the medieval period, 1100s, 1200s, the situation with commerce and trade really picked up in Bologna. There were a lot of wealthy merchant families kind of amassing wealth and power as well. They were granted a status as independent commune by Henry V. So that gave them some jurisdictional and economic advantages, and they really ran with it. So Bologna was a very important state, basically sort of small city state in Emilia-Romagna. And this is the center of town, Piazza Maggiore, and most of the buildings in this area of town are medieval and early Renaissance. That's kind of the period of town. So when you're down on the ground, it really feels like it did back in that period. So here you are in Piazza Maggiore, and you're looking at the Church of San Pedro. This was actually finished in 1390. Wonderful works of art in here. Jacopo della Quercia did the entry portal, which is gorgeous, but that'll be a different class. We're going to talk about the Carracci tonight. So I'm not even going to show y'all the entry portal. We'll do that again on another day. On the right is Palazzo dei Notai, this gorgeous building from, again, 1380s. Looking at the other end of the piazza, you can see the Palazzo di Accurzio. This was the town hall. It's now a civic museum. And then the Palazzo del Podesta, which has a kind of Renaissance era loggia on the top. And if you walk around the corner this way, you end up in this other little kind of angle of the piazza, again with this kind of dramatic medieval building called Palazzo Del Rey Enso, and the Neptune Fountain, which is kind of the meeting point in Bologna. And that was a sculpture by John Bologna from centuries later, 1560s. So just to give you an idea of what the city looked like back in the medieval period, in sort of the 1200s, this is an artist's rendering of what the city might have looked like. All of those wealthy merchant families built these incredibly tall tower houses. They did that in different cities in Italy. They did the same thing down in Florence. Here, though, they really reached for the clouds, and you can see one of those towers actually makes it, actually touches the clouds. That's the Torre of the Asinelli family, the Torre degli Asinelli. So out of 180 towers, 17 of these towers still exist, although most of them have been lopped off or lowered or encompassed into other buildings. But there are the two towers that really kind of stand out are this one, the tallest one, the Torre degli Asinelli, and the Torre from the family called Garisenda, this one here that's really leaning. This was much, much taller. It was about up to here. They lopped it off because it was leaning so badly, they thought it was going to just crash down and hurt somebody, so they actually took it down. So the deal with these towers is this was a status symbol for these families, and it was literally a place of refuge. If they were being attacked, then they literally would kind of hole up in their tower. The doors to these towers are sort of 20 feet off the ground. So this is what these towers look like when you're in downtown Bologna. So you're in the historic center of Bologna. It has this very Gothic kind of medieval feel. Here are the towers from a distance. Here's the piazza where the base of both of these towers is. This is the base of the Garisenda Tower. You can see the door. This has been carved in later, but they literally had a little trap door. They would haul it up there if they had to escape. So you also get an idea here of these porticos. This kind of really marks the city. These gorgeous porticos. There are 25 miles of them in Bologna. And under every portico, there's an art gallery or a great clothing shop or a cute little wine bar, restaurant. Bologna is a really fun visit. Very vital too, because the university's there. So there's lots of young people running around. There's lots of stuff going on all the time. So here's another view from above. If you cut down this way, on this side of the church, you get to the Palazzo Del Artigenazio. So this was the seat of the University of Bologna from the 1560s to about 1800. The university itself, though, was founded in the year 1080, making it the oldest university in the Western world. So among its, it's a great university. So there's this illustrious list of alumni and faculty, and I'm just going to read you some because it's almost, it's just amazing the intellect that came through here. So among the people who taught here or went to school here are St. Thomas Becket, Erasmus, Petrarch, Leon Battista Alberti, St. Charles Borromeo, several popes, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3, Copernicus, Albrecht Dürer, Torquato Tasso, Carlo Goldoni, Guglielmo Marconi, Michelangelo Antonioni, Pierpaolo Pasolini, Giorgio Armani, and not Galileo because they turned down his job application. Isn't that hilarious? There was a conservatory in Bologna. Gioacchino Rossino was educated there. He then became the director, and I think the conservatory is now part of the university. The 2 strongest faculties at the university today are medicine and what they call DOMS, drama, art, and music. I actually know a couple of musicians who came out of the University of Bologna. So this is the interior of that building, the Artigenazio, the old seat of the university. You can see the library. And you can see the anatomical theater. So this is where the medical school got together to have anatomy lessons. And you can see the marble table there where dissections took place. So just imagine the atmosphere in Bologna with that level of intellect running around. I mean, can you imagine, like, you know, Copernicus probably went out and had a glass of wine at the tavern, literally. So in the midst of all of this, in the mid and late 1500s, lived this family of artists. And this is the Carracci family. And they didn't start out to be, Ludovico decided to be an artist at a very young age. His cousins, Annibale and Agostino, were actually sent to be apprentices in other trades. Annibale was supposed to be a tailor and Agostino was going to be a goldsmith. And Ludovico decided he really wanted to be an artist. And he really set his mind to it. They tried to discourage him more than once, but he really would not be deterred. So Ludovico decided to be an artist. He really, again, he just really put his mind to it. And he did such a good job that he actually started selling paintings, at which point his uncle said, well, then why don't you teach Annibale and Agostino to be artists and y'all just open up a family workshop. So literally Annibale and Agostino were yanked out of their respective apprenticeships and kind of handed to Ludovico, their cousin who was just a couple years older. So they formed this family workshop. So Ludovico's idea, though, about being an artist, he didn't just want to paint paintings. He actually wanted to change the course of Italian art. He was not happy with the kind of art that was being produced by his contemporaries. And hang on one second, because I have to go to the stove. Be right back. Okay, so Ludovico. Hello. So Ludovico is not happy about the kind of where painting is. We're talking about 1570s at this point and earlier. They're kind of the period of time in the mid 1500s. The style that is prevalent at that time is tardo Mannerismo, late Mannerism. So Annibale, Ludovico, excuse me, feels like they've kind of lost the way of this great Italian, you know, artistic heritage of Italy. So I'm going to show y'all some images of paintings that Ludovico wasn't real thrilled about, and then I'm going to come back to this slide, and then I'm going to show you some images of art that that Ludovico actually did admire. I don't want y'all to get confused, so I'm going to keep coming back to this slide when we kind of change tack here. So I'm going to show you just a couple of slides of works of art that Ludovico Carracci, the first one to become an artist, kind of wasn't real happy about. So this is late Mannerism. So Ludovico felt like there was an artificiality here and a lack of clarity. He felt like the artists were not actually working from life models. They were working from their imagination, but it kind of just didn't make sense. And just the compositions themselves weren't really clear enough for him. So he didn't think that this was sort of worthy of the artistic heritage of what came before this, which would be high Renaissance in Mannerism. And then there's works like this that were being painted in the 1570s in Bologna itself. This is a local artist called Passerotti. So he's doing these sort of like, kind of like genre scenes, but he's turned them into caricatures. They're bordering on the grotesque. They're actually kind of are grotesque. They're not classy. There's no sort of intellectualism behind this. The protagonists are totally lacking in dignity. The Carracci really didn't appreciate this at all. So they felt like their artistic heritage was being squandered by painters who were working in that kind of style, and they wanted to not copy the masters who came before them, but they felt like they could work in a different style. And they thought that they could study the great masters. They could learn to work from life models and then sort of form their own style based on that. They weren't interested in copying, but they were interested in building on the artistic heritage that came before them. So they went out and took study trips. So here they are right there on the Via Emilia. They decided first to go to Parma, and they went to see the works of Correggio. This is Antonio Allegri, known as Correggio. He was painting in the early 1500s in Parma, and he was admired by the Carracci for his grace and clarity, the beauty with which he depicted mythological scenes and biblical scenes. You can see here the mystic marriage of St. Catherine, for example. Very clear scene, nice little circle, good penetration into the landscape in the background. They went to Venice to see Titian. What they were admiring in the Venetian artists is the handling of light and color. You can see that here clearly with Titian. You're looking at the Pesaro altarpiece, which is in the Church of the Frari, 1520s. And then his lovely portrait of the boy Ranuccio Farnese. This was painted around 1542. They may have actually seen this in Parma. The Farnese family was a very important family from Parma. They also had several popes and cardinals down in Rome, and they eventually were instrumental in the career of Annibale Carracci. So that's one reason I'm showing you this portrait. Another reason is because this is in the National Gallery of Art in Washington, where I used to work, and I just absolutely love this painting. I always did. I used to go sneak up there and take a look at it. Another Venetian artist that they greatly admired is Paolo Veronese. This is another painting from the National Gallery of Art, Martyrdom and Last Communion of St. Lucy, painted in 1585. So this is much later. This guy's actually contemporary with the Carracci, and they knew him and actually collaborated. This is a Venetian artist. He is known for his use of color and that very shimmering light. And another thing that the Carracci would have gotten out of here is sort of the lack of outline. Look at how the figures just kind of bleed into the atmosphere without like an actual strong outline around the figures. The Venetian painters were very good at stuff like that. Another Venetian painter, this is Tintaretto. These are both guys who kind of followed Titian in their own different ways. This is another contemporary of he was still alive when the Carracci were making their study trips. This is a nighttime crucifixion scene. This is in the Scuola Grande di San Rocco in Venice. The story goes that Ludovico went to Venice, again on his study trip, went to the door of the house of Tintaretto, knocked on the door and said, hey, can I come in and chit chat? I really admire your work and I want to be an artist too. And Tintaretto invited him in and asked to see his drawings and took a look at his drawings and said, you might want to choose a different trade. Like he just didn't think that this was really going to work out so good for Ludovico. Again, Ludovico persevered and really, as you will see in the coming slides, did some amazing, amazing things. Agostino Carracci actually ended up becoming very good friends with Tintaretto. They were each other's like godfathers to their children, and they collaborated as well. And I'll show you what they collaborated on in a second. They went to Florence on their study trip. They were looking at art by the great high Renaissance master Raphael. These are paintings that are in Florence. The Madonna of the Sedula on the left, 1513, the Palazzo Pitti, the Madonna del Cardellino, or Goldfinch in the Uffizi. So they were here. What they're getting out of Raffaello is the perfect proportion, and again, grace and beauty with which he depicts his scenes. He's also got these great, clear, solid compositions. They keep that idea in mind, although they change it up a lot. They're not sort of married to the circle, square, and triangle like the high Renaissance artists are. You'll see what they do with that because they actually dramatically change that. And then they made a point of studying Andrea del Sarto, the Florentine high Renaissance master. These are two paintings in Palazzo Pitti, St. John the Baptist on the left, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous work of art. And then on the right, Madonna and Child with St. Elizabeth and San Giovannino, little baby St. John. Here again, they're looking at the draftsmanship and use of color. You can't really shake a stick at the color of Andrea del Sarto. Look at the St. Mary's mauve head wrap. Love it. So these are the guys whom the Carracci really admired. So here's Ludovico, who everybody's trying to tell him that maybe you should just, become a shoemaker or something because they didn't think that he was that good of an artist. He really persevered. He brought in his cousins. They formed this family workshop, and they really set out to go against the mainstream. So super courageous here. They decided to, as I said, base their own works of art to kind of create their own style based on the painters who came before them, who they admire, the ones we just saw, kind of their own artistic patrimony, and then life drawing. And I'm just going to show you a couple of their really early works. This is one of Ludovico's first compositions. This is an Annunciation for the Church of San Giorgio in Bologna. And again, Ludovico wasn't the most dynamic painter in the world, but it's interesting what he's done. So it's quite different from what other artists at the time were doing. And he was selling and he was getting commissions, and he must have been very good also at kind of dealing with the patrons, because he landed this huge commission of decorating the interior of the Palazzo of Count Filippo Fava. And this was done as a workshop production. So it was actually signed the Carracci, all three of them. And what he did was, that is, decorated the frieze, this bit right here, that goes all around the top of the room, just under this gorgeous coffered ceiling. And I'm going to show you just one scene from up there. So this is one scene from this kind of involved myth of the Golden Fleece and Jason and Medea. And they really, in this case, they divided up how they worked. So Ludovico dealt with the client. Ludovico did kind of the outline of the compositions. He did some retouching, but most of the painting was done by Annibale, who was the more gifted painter. And then Agostino was in charge of the grisaille kind of trompe-l'oeil sculptural decoration. So they worked very well together. And so they had this family workshop, and they start doing commissions in Bologna and beyond, signing it, as I said, as the Carracci. But they also did some of their own work. So here's a work by Annibale. This is Annibale's Baptism of Christ, done for the Church of San Gregorio in Bologna. And you can see here that he's really kind of learned what he learned during his study trip, right? He's done this very nice, clear scene of St. John the Baptist pouring the water of the baptism on the head of Jesus. So he is working here, doing his best to really kind of show lifelike representation, but not to the point where, as some of his contemporaries were doing, nobody's got dirty feet in this picture, okay? It's very nicely done, it's beautiful. The figures are shown with decorum, and you can see what's going on. So this, interestingly, went hand in hand with what the church was kind of asking for at this point. We're in the period of the Counter-Reformation. The Protestant Reformation happened in 1517. There was actually a book published in Bologna in 1582, and this is the frontispiece. You can see it here. It was written by Bishop Paliotti, and it's called De Imaginibus Sacris et Profanis. So it's about sacred images, and the church is actually asking for works of art to be created that can convey clearly the teachings of the church. They want artists to use their own style. They're not commenting on creativity. They want artists to use their own style, but they really want all of the saints and holy figures to be recognizable. They want tradition to be respected. They would like to see faithfulness to the sacred text, and they urge painters to really try and instruct parishioners by imitating life and then showing these figures very clearly. So that goes hand in hand with what the Carracci family were doing, and I think that probably helped them get some of these religious commissions. So taking all this one step further, this is a drawing by Ludovico. You can see what a wonderful draftsman he became. So they decided to actually open an academy. So they take their workshop a step further. They don't just bring in a couple of guys to be apprentices. They actually opened what they called an academy, the Accademia dei Desideratori, the people who really have a desire to learn how to be artists. And they teach them to study the old masters. They teach them to draw from life, so the techniques of painting, plus they give them a humanities education, math, philosophy, literature. They really believe that this intellectual approach is necessary in order to properly interpret any of this complicated subject matter that comes their way. So this is a first in the history of art workshops in Italy, and it really then became the norm, but these are the first guys to do this. So think about it. They are teaching this new pictorial language which they have invented, which actually becomes what we call the Baroque style. So they directly influence all of the art, or a lot of the artists who are practicing Baroque art in the 1600s. And they call it the Bologna school. The Bologna school is the Carracci school, it's them. So here's Ludovico, figure drawing. He was kind of the head of the academia. He taught his innovative artistic theories. He taught figure drawing. This is one of his drawings. It looks to me to be his brother, Annibale. They used to pose for each other. Here's another of Ludovico's drawings. They wanted to improve their figure drawing and painting, and so they asked to participate in some of the dissections in the anatomical theater, which wasn't really allowed, but there was a certain Dr. Lanzoni who was a lecturer who let them in, so they got some training in the dissections as well. This is what Agostino was working on. He became a really important engraver. This is what he did as a child. He's 14 years old when he did this series of saints, and you can see God there on the right. Here is one of the works he did. This is, if you recognize it, we just looked at it. This is Tintaretto's Nighttime Crucifixion. Tintaretto was really impressed by this, and Agostino actually became the official engraver of both Tintaretto and Paolo Veronese. So works like this obviously could be produced in series. People who couldn't necessarily afford to commission a painting for their house could afford a work of art like this. And these things were circulated even among artists so that you could kind of see what other people were doing. He also worked in the publishing industry. So these are some of Agostino's originals. These are engravings that were done for a publication of Torquato Tasso's immensely popular Gerusalemme Liberata, this kind of epic poem. This was published in 1590, bestseller, full of works of art by Agostino Carracci. So that was kind of his career. I'm going to show you a couple of works now by the innovative painter Annibale. So Annibale was sort of the best painter of the three. He also taught in the academy and taught painting and painting techniques and theory. Some of his really early works are this kind of work. This is genre painting, so just pictures of everyday life. And in this case, this is a boy drinking wine. It's in the collection at Cleveland. And this is a genre painting. It almost looks like a study in a certain sense, because you can see that Annibale is really working out things like reflections and light and some of his brush work. You can see here the reflections here. Look at how the light comes down and just lands like on the inner eyelid even of this guy. And just the foreshortening of the face is remarkable. Here's another detail. Absolutely gorgeous brushwork. You can see how look at how the ruffle looks over here with the naked eye and how the ruffle comes through when you look at it through the decanter, the way the light comes through the wine and lands on his shirt, the lovely little reflections of his fingers in the decanter itself. I'm going to give you a quote from Keith Christensen, who is the chairman of European Paintings Department at the Met in New York City. He was curator. He's been a professor, he's written tons of books, and I found these articles that he wrote on the Carracci. And kind of notably, Keith Christensen wrote, during the 1580s, the Carracci were painting the most radical and innovative pictures in Europe. So kudos to Ludovico. Annibale not only drew from nature, he created a new broken brushwork to capture movement and the effects of light on form. So you can really see that here. And just look at the brushwork. Look at this one. I don't paint. I know there are a couple of y'all in the audience who do paint, and one of y'all in particular I know is really good with stuff like this. I've tried that. It's just not easy at all. Look at this one brush stroke right here. I love this. Look at it, comes down and he just goes, ee. And then of course, miraculously, it just looks like that guy just shoved his sleeve right up his arm. It's just beautiful, just absolutely gorgeous. So just that Annibale, who's getting these fancy commissions, would also take the time to dedicate to a scene like this or like this. This is the Mangiafagioli, the Bean Eaters by Annibale Carracci. It's in a small gallery, the Galleria Colonna in Rome. This is 1583, so again, a very early work by Annibale. He really, again, he's kind of elevating genre painting to an important type of painting. You know, he's not parodying anybody. There's no caricature here. He's treating the subject with dignity, and he's even treating the guy's lunch with dignity. He's really kind of painted this as if it were a Dutch still life. So here's this farmer who's taking a break to eat a bowl of black-eyed peas, and he may be in a tavern or something, and it looks like Annibale just came up and said, "Do you mind if I draw your portrait while you're having lunch?" And he's like, "Okay, go for it." And so Annibale just does this wonderful, very dignified portrayal of this peasant farmer and his lunch. And if you look at it, I looked at this and I was like, well, but he can't reach his wine. That guy can't get to his wine. That guy would not have put his glass of wine where it is, on the other side of that very humble ceramic jug. So if you look at it, I kind of wonder if maybe Annibale didn't say, "Do you mind if I just like move your wine out of the way for a second?" Because of course, if the wine were where the guy could get to it, which is here, we wouldn't be able to see that hand. And to me, that hand kind of ties this whole thing together. Pictorially, it kind of puts a stop on things, kind of keeps everything together. And then it's just sort of emblematic of this person's very sort of gentle hand resting on the piece of bread. You can tell this guy is a worker. You know, his hands are sort of calloused and rough. and delicately placed on top of his bread. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous work of art. So Annibale was a really gifted painter, and then kind of open-minded and did stuff like this, as well as stuff like this. So these are sort of the typical altarpieces. Notice here, this is sort of the Carracci style, right? What became really the Baroque style. So A, it's super clear, you know what's going on. In case you missed it, in case you're like this guy, and you're like, well, there's an empty tomb and there's this, you know, shroud, but where's the person? And all of his buddies are like, it's up here. So this is the Assumption of the Virgin, very obvious where you're supposed to look and what's going on. Classicizing elements, great dramatic diagonals and kind of oblique lines coming out at you like this. Also in the Temptation of St. Anthony Abbot on the right. So these are paintings by Annibale that really got him some renown in the area where he grew up, all the way over to Parma, where his Farnese connections got him connected with the Cardinal Eduardo Farnese in Rome. He was called to Rome. He was doing the decorations of the Palazzo Farnese for several years. He went to Rome in 1594. He actually stayed there. He died in Rome in 1609. He was known, he was considered basically the best artist of his day, and his talent and his skill and his innovation was recognized. He was buried in the Pantheon next to Raphael. So you can see that his contemporaries really admired what he was doing. Interestingly, he lived in Rome. He got to Rome basically the year before maybe Caravaggio got there. Caravaggio was a younger artist. And they died at about the same time. So they kind of had their careers in Rome kind of overlapped. So I'm going to show you now some paintings that were influenced by the Carraccis and their academy. So some of these were influenced directly. They were students. Some of them were influenced more kind of by osmosis. So first of all, Caravaggio, who really did develop his own subset of Baroque art, but the fact that he was painting the Baroque style is likely due to what the Carracci were doing in the first place. He's 10 years behind Annibale, who was the youngest of the Carracci. So Annibale was already an established artist before Caravaggio started painting. So the idea of the Baroque style came from the Carracci workshop, and then he, of course, introduced his own subset of Baroque art. Annibale and Caravaggio work a little bit not enemies necessarily, but they kind of worked against each other, and they were competitors. They competed for commissions, some of which Annibale actually won. And then Annibale apparently said that Caravaggio's works were nothing more than a great contrast of light and shade, too faithful to nature, without decorum and with little grace and less knowledge. A manifest ruin of good design. Okay, that's apparently what Annibale said about Caravaggio, but whether or not that's actually true, it may be true. They were competitors, but you can see that what Annibale prizes is naturalness, but not exactly supreme realism. So the fact that this guy's, got a hole in his elbow, the elbow of his jacket, is sort of lacking in decorum and not graceful. And when he says less knowledge, so that intellectual background for Annibale is really important. So that's Caravaggio's Supper at Emmaus that you see there on the left. Another Keith Christensen quote about Caravaggio and Annibale, he said that by 1630, the Caravaggesque kind of style of painting was in decline, while Annibale's art was being studied by a new generation of artists. And then this new generation of artists, of course, had been trained personally by the Carracci in their academy. So people like Guido Reni on the right, the Massacre of the Innocents, still in Bologna. Some other, this is Domenichino, Sacrifice of Isaac in the Prado, Guercino's genre painting of a fruit cellar. These guys came out of the Carracci Academy. And then here's a couple pictures just kind of by both of whom, these guys were by Caravaggio as well. Vasquez, the water seller of Seville, he came to Rome right after the death of Caravaggio and Carracci, and knew the works of Carracci, which were in the royal collection in Madrid, because Philip IV Habsburg had actually purchased some of these works of art. So Velázquez, who was court painter, knew them in that collection. And then Rubens was on record for praising the works of Annibale Carracci, and you can really see the influence of the Carracci here in that painting by Rubens. He also praised Caravaggio, but you can see here that the Carracci had a big impact on Rubens. So let's go back into the kind of old city of Bologna. Nothing in this piazza looks any different than it did when the Carracci were living here. And I'm going to take you into what's called the Quadrilateral. This is this kind of warren of little square streets, 90-degree angles, that is. Right back here, if you walk through this arch, you go into the Quadrilateral. So if you walk in there and turn around, you're looking back at the Palazzo del Rey Enso. And if you walk into the Quadrilateral, it looks like this. So it's just this warren of little streets, chock full of all kinds of shops. Not all of them are selling food, but lots of them are selling food. People are out buying food, stopping to have a snack, a glass of wine, chit chat. Here's the great store called Tamburini, right there in the Quadrilateral in Bologna. And they sell all sorts of specialties that are made in that area of Emilia-Romagna, where between kind of Bologna and Parma, Reggio and Modena. And you can see on the right, just some tortellini, which we're about to learn how to make. And then ciccioli, which are my personal favorite, which are basically, it's like fried pork belly, so good. They also sell big old chunks of Parmigiano, which is made there in the area. This is from a producer right at Modena called Ombre. Here are various in the area of Modena, producers of balsamic vinegar. This is a very fun visit. This whole area is just full of great food producers. And then of course, there are these amazing cured pork products. On the left, that is La Signora Bocchetti's, or Bocchi, I think is her name, her culatello. So it's culatello di zibello is a type of prosciutto, a boneless prosciutto, which is made in, so it's in the mountains there, kind of above Parma. This is Langhirano, Borgo Val di Taro. Some of y'all who are on the line tonight were actually with me, and we went to Mrs. Bocchi's, the butcheress's aging cells for her culatello. And then on the right, you see mortadella. We're about to cook with both of these or similar products. And the mortadella, we're having a nice glass of Lambrusco. And that was from a wine trip we did last June. Hopefully we'll be able to travel again soon. So last June we did a wine trip. I did it together with a friend of mine who's a sommelier. We went through Piemonte, down to Bologna, and then into Tuscany. And then when we're in Bologna, we eat at the Trattoria da Gianni. This is my favorite restaurant. So actually, the first time I went to Bologna, there was this older gentleman. I asked him, you know, where he likes to eat, and he sent me down this alleyway to the Trattoria da Gianni. And you can kind of see very kind of old-fashioned, low-key trattoria with Bolognese folks. And you can see some of the examples of their plates on the right. So you're looking at antipasto, mortadella, and then two different first courses, of course, tagliatelle alla bolognese, and then the great tortellini and brodo, which we're about to make. Second course, bollito misto, mixed boiled meats with different little sauces and stuff. And in Tuscany, they actually call this lesso, and Lorenzo's gonna tell you all about that. But first, I'm gonna show y'all how to make tortellini. So these are the ingredients that we're gonna be using, both Lorenzo and I. So I'm gonna make tortellini, and I'm gonna show you the brodo that I made. And then Lorenzo's gonna show you the brodo that he made and all of his little sauces. So let me stop sharing my screen, if I can figure that out. Okay, so we're doing this because this is like Christmas lunch food. So I'm gonna make some tortellini, and I'm using a super, super classic recipe. The filling is basically all kinds of pork held together with some cheese. So I'm gonna use, this is a pork loin that I just ahead of time just kind of cooked in some olive oil and bay, my new favorite spice. So bay leaves and olive oil, that's pork loin. And then I'm gonna use a piece of prosciutto. I got my butcher to cut me a 100-gram piece of prosciutto, so this thing's huge. So I'm gonna cut this up. I'm gonna do all this in a food processor. So I'm gonna cut this up just to kind of help it get going. I don't want it to remain in any big, humongous chunks. And then we're gonna use some mortadella. I'm actually gonna add the mortadella second because it's so much softer that I don't want this to turn into a paste. I want it to remain kind of chunky, but in order to get the hard prosciutto chunky, the mortadella ends up turning into just a mush. So here's the mortadella, and this is actually mortadella made in San Quirico, right up the street. My butchers have taken to making their own mortadella, and it's actually quite good. In the beginning, it tasted like they were using pumpkin pie spice, which is really not a good match for mortadella at all. So they've learned to calm that down a little bit. Mortadella is an ancient Roman recipe invented in Bologna, hence our Bologna. And the word mortadella comes from, we believe, the word for mortaio or mortar, because they literally would take the pork fat and spices and just mash it up in a mortar and pestle. So that's the origin of mortadella. So I'm going to just put these things into the food processor, the harder meats first, and then the mortadella second. So again, it needs to stay kind of chunky, or at least needs to have some kind of tooth to it. We don't want it to be a paste. That's not the idea. I think that's good. So you can kind of see how it's still chunky. You really don't want it. It'll make the mortadella in particular will just turn into like this pink paste. You really don't want it to do that. So I'm just going to put most of it here. And then this is with, so this is 3 pounds of pork. And it's going to get mixed with some Parmesan cheese, a tiny bit of nutmeg, no salt, no pepper. Both of those things were included with the prosciutto and the mortadella. So I'm going to add nutmeg, which is kind of an interesting cut. I'm going to add a good bit too. I really want to be able to taste it. I don't want to overdo it, but it needs to show up. And then grated Parmesan cheese. You don't have to use the cheese to overcome the meat, but you want a good bit of cheese. And I'm going to hold the whole thing together with an egg. So everything in here basically is cooked. So by the time you go to the meeting, they don't take very long. So that looks good. So a tiny bit more cheese. And then I'm going to add an egg, and then I'll show you how to fill them. So the egg binds it. So this really is typical Christmas lunch, and it's kind of a good kind of family event because these things are so tiny. It's not super simple to make them for everybody. So it's kind of a good group activity. I kind of smell a teensy bit of nutmeg. It smells very good. I'm actually going to taste it to make sure I'm cheese. So again, you want the stronger flavor. You don't want the cheese to overpower. So I think that's good. So I'm going to make pasta. Y'all have seen me make pasta so many times. I made the pasta dough already. For those of you who have not seen me make pasta, soon enough, we're going to have recordings on here, and I'll tell you where to go to see it. And I'm actually going to do this again pretty soon when we go to Mantua. I'm going to make some more pasta. But for today, I've already made the pasta. I'm just going to run it through the pasta machine. And then I'll show y'all how to fill the tortellini. pretty thin pasta sheet when you do this because you really want to be eating the tortellini filling more than just full-time pasta. Okay, one more time and I'll start to.
Then it's the same kind of pasta we made the last time.
This is the exact same kind of pasta. The bolognese, a lot of times call for just the one kind of flour, but I just go ahead and use the two kinds of flour because I like it. So you can always use just regular kind of all-purpose flour without adding semolina if you don't want to. But again, I kind of like the texture you get with the semolina, so I just use that, my standard recipe. Although you may notice I kind of worked out the egg to flour ratio and it needed much less flour here at the end. So I made it super thin so that we don't have too much pasta in relation to the filling. I'm going to just show you how to fill these. They say that you shouldn't, you start with squares of pasta, and they say you shouldn't do anything smaller or anything bigger than 3 centimeters square, because otherwise, of course, it just turns into, they turn into tortelloni instead of tortellini. We want tortellini. However, 3 centimeters is way too tiny. I think you have to be born in Bologna to be able to do that because I can't make it work. So I'm going to do 4 centimeters. And I'm going to show you what they look like, and then I'm going to do one, I'm going to do it huge so that you can see it up close and personal.
You buy your regolo in Bologna?
Excuse me?
You bought your regolo in Bologna to make tortellini. The white piece of plastic or paper, what is?
Oh, you call it a regolo? I made it. This is my little thing that's helping me cut perfect 4 centimeter squares. The idea is to take a teensy little square. Again, I'm going to show you. I'm going to make a big one for you, but first I'm going to show you the real way to do this is to take a 4 centimeter square. Actually, they want you to take a 3 centimeter square, which if you ask me is way too difficult. Again, you have to be born in Bologna to be able to do that. Teensy little bite of filling, and then fold the pasta up. You want to bring a point towards the other point. Doesn't have to touch, doesn't have to reach all the way. Stretch the pasta around the filling. Press really well. You want to use just rolled out pasta. You can't do this an hour ahead of time or it'll harden up. And then take the points around each other and press. And then you have a beautiful little tortellino. So I'm going to show you that. Very big.
Elaine, if it's possible, try to talk facing the computer because we have some problem with the audio.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So I'm going to just show you a humongous one. This is a tortelloni. I'm just showing you this so you can actually see how you close it up. So you put some filling in the middle, bring the bottom point up towards the top point, close enough, but not all the way. Press it. And then wrap it around the back. And there you are, tortelloni. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going here because this will take me a while to make enough for one portion, and we're gonna swap out. We're going to Lorenzo's house now. Okay. So Lorenzo.
I take my video in evidence. So welcome to my kitchen. I'm changing my camera. I hope that you can listen to me. So welcome. This is my house. So I'm going to show you something that we prepare when we make boiled meat. So it's very important, the difference between when we make a broth to have a good meat to eat and a broth to have a good meat to eat tortellini.
So I made the tortellini broth. Yeah.
Elaine made, sorry, I'm not crazy. I have the audio in the other computer and the camera without the audio. So if you, there's no Elaine here. So the difference is that in the time you put the meat in the water, so or in the broth. So if you want a good broth for tortellini, you have to put all the ingredients in the cold water. So all the vegetables and meat in the cold water. If you want to eat a very good meat, you have to put the meat when the vegetables and the water are boiling, so you have a very good vegetable broth. So you put the meat and going to cook. So I cannot read. Okay, so here we are. I prepared the broth with meat, but when we serve in Tuscany meat, but in all part of Italy, we have a lot of dressing because only meat should be boiling. So I write some kind of dressing. The first one is nuts dressing, red peppers dressing, and the queen of the dressing is salsa verde, green sauce. I have already prepared those two sauce.
So, Lorenzo, tell us the ingredients in the quale hai fatto noce?
So, come?
Hai fatto noci?
No, le noci? Yeah.
What are the ingredients that's in there?
Okay, the ingredients are very similar to all the sauce, but we have the fresh nuts. So this is more we make in summer when we find the green nuts. So nuts, fresh nuts, parsley, capers, vinegar, wine vinegar, extra virgin olive oil, and salt and pepper. This is the sauce. If you have mortar, you can use this or a processor food. So we have to reach this kind of sauce.
Yum. So imagine that on a good old piece of
this
something.
The red peppers sauce. There's no very big difference. Only we use also the bread and we roast the peppers before. So we then roast the peppers, put out the skin, and then we put in the mixer and with garlic, bread, vinegar, olive oil, and salt and pepper. The queen, Her Majesty, this green sauce is the very incredible sauce that's very simple, but it's very tasty. The ingredients, and I show you how to prepare. The principal ingredients is parsley. So we have parsley, green parsley, fresh. We have capers and anchovy. We have garlic, fresh garlic, and then boiled egg.
Yum. I love salsa verde.
And Sagon olive oil. And I also use, this is the cover of the pot, but it's okay. We have some people who want to come. So I use vinegar because normally I buy capers without vinegar, but under salt. But the original recipe want the capers under vinegar. So I put a little bit of vinegar. Salt and pepper, the wine is for the chef. So I'm going to prepare, I prefer to use a knife. And I wash the parsley and I cut. I'm going to chop very thin.
Lorenzo makes this for his job where he serves lampredotto, which is basically a Tuscan boiled meat, which they don't really serve in Bologna. But the sauce goes really well with the lampredotto as it does with all the boiled meats. So I don't know, Lorenzo I told Lorenzo he was free to make a Tuscan bollito, which in Tuscany they don't call it bollito, they call it lesso. Giusto, Lorenzo?
Okay.
Dicevo, non si dice bollito, si dice lesso.
And we call lesso. So it's lesso is a Tuscany word also if you can use when some people is very tired. So when I'm tired, I say io sono lesso. I cannot do anymore. So
When you're exhausted and you've had it at the end of the day, I'm lesta.
It's the same for bollito. In other part of Italy, they use bollito, but lesso is the name of all the meat that you can cook in the broth. Also, we have fish, boiled fish. So some fishes that you make in vegetable broth. For example, some soup. Okay. We also put eggs. And then anchovy. Some capers. And garlic. Then I cut. And then we are going to chop. You can also use mortar if you have one. But this part, the beginning, I prefer to use knives. I don't put any more salt because anchovy and capers are with a lot of salt, so you have to taste before.
Anchovies and salt add tons of salt. I'm adding Parmesan cheese to mine too, so I didn't add too much salt to the broth. Lorenzo, io vado avanti a bollire va bene,
See? Okay.
the tortellini in the broth and show you how to serve it. They literally boil in the broth. They cook in the broth, and they're super fresh, so they're really going to take about 2 to 3 minutes to cook. And then, of course, so I made broth on purpose to serve tortellini in, which means I just cooked everything to death, put it in cold water, let it cook, and here's the output. And so this is, I'm not going to serve this to people. I'd probably eat it for lunch. I mean, it's perfectly edible. So I'll eat this with some mustard for lunch tomorrow because I don't have any of Lorenzo's green sauce, unfortunately. So broth, typical is meat broth, which is what we're doing because we're making bollito as well. A lot of times for Christmas, the people will use brodo di capone or guinea hen broth, and actually put a few pieces of guinea hen in with mine. I used some beef, a couple of bones. I used a piece of pork with the bone, and then I used a wing. I had a neck of a guinea hen, so I used that. Guinea hen makes, the broth of the guinea hen, if y'all can find it, I highly recommend it. It tastes like, I mean, it's like, it tastes as kind of potent as a bouillon cube, but of course it's natural. It's not a bouillon cube. It's really, really, really good. So I used a little bit of that in here with the other meats to kind of make a mix, which is nice and rich. It's good and wintry. But a lot of times for Christmas, people just do the capon broth or guinea hen. So these have all floated to the top. I'm going to go ahead and put them in a bowl. So this would be served as first course of Christmas lunch or any holiday lunch. And it's kind of a labor of love making all these baby tortellini, which I presume is why it's used for holidays. The idea, though, of eating pasta in broth is kind of a good one. And my friend Piero, who y'all heard me talk about a lot, he's an old farmer guy on Prato Magno. He used to like to eat homemade tagliatelle in broth, and he would serve it in a bowl, long tagliatelle, and he would serve it and you would have a spoon and a fork, and you would just eat your tagliatelle and then have a sip of broth every now and again. So this then is the actual tortellini in brodo with abundant Parmesan cheese on top. And then served like that. Can y'all see that better if I go like that? Maybe. I can't really show it to you because I'll end up pouring, there it is. And that look good. Yum. Lorenzo, te a che punto sei?
I'm ready.
So Lorenzo, I have this first course. Lorenzo has the second course, which of course is the meat course.
I'm going to put my video in evidence. Will you do it for me, Elaine?
Che faccio?
Metti il video in evidenza.
Quale? Questo?
Quello dove si vede lo schermo, no, la cucina.
Io non vedo la cucina.
So wait.
No, io vedo la tua faccia e vedo il banco di lavoro. We didn't go over the tech part here. Lorenzo's gotten fancy on me. He's using 2 cameras.
I have another. So, eccomi.
Cosa devo fare?
So, we have made this sauce.
Yum.
I have put in the mortar and a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of vinegar. And then I'm going to take my meat. It's very simple. So I have prepared for you some typical Italian and some typical Florentine and Tuscany part of the meat. So here I am. We have.
Lorenzo, vieni qua or no?
Eccomi.
Oh, good. Oh my gosh, look at that.
I'm going to show you the meat that I prepare. So I take a plate and then we have chicken breast. We have chicken breast with leg and with leg. So this is the meat. The part of the meat that I use is the bianco stato. In Italian, is bianco stato.
Where's it come from?
It's the part of the cow. So it's very tasty, and you can leave in the broth for a little bit more if you have a lot of people to the dinner. So this is one of my favorite, the tongue. This is only a little part of the tongue of the cow. Normally the cow have a tongue like this.
So Lorenzo, do you want to tell them how you prepared that?
Sorry?
Do you want to tell them how you prepared it? Come hai preparato la lingua?
Oh, it's the you put in the broth. I only take out the skin of the tongue.
So he peeled it before he put it on the plate.
Come? Sorry?
Ho detto che l'hai pelato prima di mettere.
Yeah, I put the skin before, because the skin, usually in Italy, we don't find roast this kind of meat, like tongue raw. So you have, for my work, for example, I find already boiled one for some Italian reason. So we don't have a long time to cook them, but normally we cook for 2-3 hours the tongue and other part of meat. So it depends this is a very vitella, so it's very young cow. It's not vitellone. We don't use the tongue of vitellone. It's very hard, not softly. So it's not. And this is my work. You can find this part of cow only in Florence. This is lampredotto. So this is the 4th stomach of the cow, and it's very, very incredible that you can find only in Florence. You cannot find it in other part of Italy.
And that is really good with that green sauce that Lorenzo just made.
So, and you can serve this part of meat with all these sauce that we are preparing. So,
Una domanda. I have a question. So to keep the meat tender,
I'm going very near to the computer.
okay, so to keep the meat tender, is it best to keep the meat in the broth until you serve it?
Okay, so wait.
I keep la domanda.
No, dimmi.
Per mantenere la carne morbida è meglio lasciarla nel brodo fino all'ora di servizio o si mette fuori sul
No. Okay. The problem is that you leave if you prepare before and then you leave in the broth, the meat is going si distrugge. I cannot know the English word. Is you have the chicken became stopposo. Is yeah. So the best, if you have to prepare before, you cook and then take off the meat, and at the end, for example, very before the dinner, you have to make the broth reboiling. So after you put back the meat, so you can warm the meat and
bring the broth back to a boil and then put the meat in there.
For warm, not for to cook. So, but it's very incredible.
Very nice. So
we have a lot of questions that
I'm looking at them. Everybody's they're all comments about everybody hates tongue. Now some people ate tongue. Look, Kathy Miller grew up in Argentina and ate tongue and lampredotto. If y'all want to open your microphone, we can take some questions now.
Wait, I'm going to. Okay, here we are.
Elaine, you didn't season the meat inside the tortellini with no salt, no pepper.
No salt, no pepper, because the prosciutto is super salty, and so is the mortadella, which also has peppercorns in it. So the salt and pepper was added with the prosciutto and the mortadella. I didn't add any extra. And by the way, the Parmesan is super salty as well, so there was no need to add salt.
Oh yeah.
Other questions, anybody?
Yeah, we have a question. Jen say, how thick do you roll out the pasta? What number something do you use on the machine?
I go as thin as possible. I don't know if y'all can actually see. I go as thin as I can possibly get it. Look, you can see my hands through there. Like I said, I don't want the tortellini to be all pasta. I want you to be able to actually taste some of the filling. So I try to make the tortellini as thin as possible. Last setting.
Lorenzo, when you cook the tongue, you boil the tongue, and then the skin got hard, then you had to peel it off. What'd you boil it in? What was in there? Onion?
Odori? I messo odori nel bollito.
In the broth is in the broth I put all the vegetables. So onions, carrots, celery, parsley, and a little bit of fresh tomato in summer or peeled tomato in this period of the year. So normally at work I don't put salt in broth because I have to use a lot of my broth. So if you use in your house, you can put a little bit of salt and grain of peppers if you want, or other flavor if you like. In summer it's very good to put some basil leaves. It's very incredible. But when you buy the tongue, if the tongue is not for a young cow, so you need a lot of time to cook. My granny recommend to cook in another pot, not in the same pot of the other meat, because the fat of the tongue have a very strong flavor. So if you want to make also the tongue, you have one pot for all the meat together. So chicken, beef, or if you have pork, if you like it. I don't like in the broth, for example, it's so fat. So, but if you have in the same vegetables in another pot and you cook the tongue, but when you serve together.
Does that other meat, that other stomach that you said only can find in wherever, is it like tripe? Does it have the texture of tripe?
Tripe is one of the stomachs. This is
what I thought the other one was.
Normally cow have 4 stomachs. So when we say tripe in Italy, you say the first and the second stomach. Is the white one is very big, and the first also is very big one. The other one is we say cuffia because it's like the hat that our granny put in the head when they have shower. It's the same.
Okay. I got it.
So the third stomach is a centopelle, and in Florence we don't use. It's strange, but we don't use, only in some soup, but not in Florence. And the fourth stomach is lampredotto. The name of these stomachs are omaso, abomaso, reticolo, and rumine, the Italian word. So I say I call it the Florentine one. So
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Once the tortellini are formed and made, is it possible to freeze them?
Yeah, I've never. Yes.
Yeah.
I have before actually frozen the filling as well, and just made a couple of, I might have made half a recipe or something, froze the filling, and then made some new pasta later to make more. Or you can actually, I think you can leave them out for a day, maybe put them in the fridge even, or yes, you can freeze them. And you can pop them, if you freeze them, I would pop them directly into the boiling broth, as opposed to letting them come back to room temperature.
Okay. After freezing, immediately into brodo.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. I would say 15 to 20 little tortellini is a good serving size for a plate of tortellini and brodo. I see lots of great comments over here. One is that my grandfather thought it wasn't Christmas without tortellini. That's kind of nice. Not that we, and then this is from my mom, who says he didn't really get that treat very often, but it was a nice idea. And then I see lots of people have tongue stories. That's great. Lots of people eating tongue.
I think I'll leave now. Parto
The more they eat, the less you have to eat. So that's fine.
And Jean, mine's going to be funghi, vegetariano. Okay.
Yeah, but Lisa say that it's very hard to difficult traveling in Italy because she is vegetarian. I think we have a lot of...
Non è vero. È molto facile viaggiare in Italia come melanzane, parmigiano, tutto.
Teeny parmigiano. So somebody just asked, where does Lorenzo sell lampredotto? Lorenzo has basically like a little food truck in Piazza Dalmazia. So all of you locals, you can go visit Lorenzo for some takeout lampredotto in Piazza Dalmazia. All right, so I'm going to say bye to everybody. I will read through the chat in case I didn't get to some questions, and I'll answer them tomorrow when I send out the recipes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you. Thanks. It was great.
Ciao, ciao. Arrivederci,
Ciao,
Lorenzo
Bella.
e Elena.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Elaine. Thank you, Lorenzo.
Wonderful. Bel programma di Bologna, mi piace molto. Brava. Ciao.
Bravo, Lorenzo.
Thank you.
Ciao Lorenzo,
Thanks, Lorenzo.
grazie.
Thanks, Elaine.
Chin chin.
Chin chin.
Very popular.